Hello, Tulsi. Hi, Dan.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Aloha.
Aloha. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure. The Nowman Show based out of Pasadena. You maybe want to get my boogie board out. 40 to 45% of the population now is actually struggling to get basic necessities. This is serious crisis. This is an emergency.
Yes.
Which we've been ignoring for 2 years. Many of us have been affected by that crash in 2008.
Yes.
Nothing is done. Not a thing. How do we realistically get this group of people here together, as well as millions of people, to stand together and demand this change? Now,
Two things. It's getting rid of I agree with you. It's getting rid of the influence of big money and Wall Street money in Washington that has stopped real reform from taking place to break up the big banks and hold them responsible for gambling with our futures. That still hasn't happened. It is only we the people that can demand and hold leaders accountable in order to make this kind of change.
And we have to love each other and radically show that to each other.
Exactly.
And you can do that for us.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Niswander, and you're watching The Nowman Show, and I am here in Los Angeles with Andrew Yang, who is running for President of the United States on the Democratic Party ticket. Andrew, welcome to LA. A lot of people out there, if they know about universal basic income, they find it very controversial, right? So for the basics of it, for people who may not know what it is, can you give us a simple explanation?
Sure. Universal basic income is a policy where everyone in a society, let's call it every American citizen, receives a certain amount of money to meet his or her basic needs, no questions asked. It's a right of citizenship. So under my plan, the Freedom Dividend, every American adult would start receiving $1,000 a month, starting at age 18, every month until the day you die.
So, a lot of people would ask you this question, I'm sure, but people want to know, how's that going to get paid for?
Well, the great thing is our economy is up to a record $20 trillion in GDP, up $5 trillion in the last 12 years. And in terms of how to pay for it, if you look around at the big winners from artificial intelligence and new technologies, it's going to be Amazon, Google, Facebook, Uber. And Amazon literally paid zero in federal taxes last year.
And Facebook did too, right?
I have to confirm that,
Yeah.
but I know Netflix paid zero. Would not surprise me if Facebook paid zero or close to zero. So you have to ask yourself, is that their fault or our fault? And so when you ask, how do you pay for this universal basic income? If we put in a new tax to start harvesting the gains from all these innovations and new technologies, we can generate hundreds of billions, which combined with the economic activity from putting this money into people's hands, plus cost savings on things like incarceration and homelessness services and emergency room health care, plus the value gains from having a stronger, healthier, better educated, mentally healthier, more productive population would be enough to pay for a dividend of $1,000 a month. The way I describe it is that we have to start investing in our people. Companies do this all the time. They expect that they'll win. We have to do the same thing for all citizens.
And a lot of people would wonder about the cost of living, because like in a city like Los Angeles, it's very expensive here. So $1,000 might be okay for Iowa or West Virginia, but what about Los Angeles or Manhattan, for instance?
Well, it's $1,000 a month on top of whatever you're currently making. So it would be a game changer for people in most parts of the country. But it's true that it doesn't go as far in places like Los Angeles as it would in rural communities and places around the country.
So a lot of people would also question, when you say value-added tax, they would say, ooh, tax. What is that exactly?
Well, again, if you look around at other countries, they've figured out what we have not. So if you have your biggest tech companies, literally trillion-dollar companies paying zero in federal taxes, it's partially because the income tax system is really easy to game. A company like Amazon or Netflix will say it just went through Ireland or it didn't happen here in the U.S. So what other countries have already done is they've already implemented a value-added tax, which then means if you're benefiting from that marketplace, you have to pay into it. And that's the most foolproof way to make sure that the American people get a tiny slice of every Amazon purchase, every Google search, every robot truck mile, every Facebook ad, and on and on.
Because, one of our founding fathers, Thomas Paine, was a proponent of the citizens' dividend, is what he called, and he was a radical. He was even considered a radical in his day. And I know a lot of people from all across the political spectrums, and their critique of that is everywhere from, well, we've all heard the free money nonsense. Everybody just wants free money, just like Bernie, free education, And then I've also heard other criticisms as well, because people are concerned that, like, well, isn't that just like a form of reform? And as much as we all love the New Deal and everything like that, there's people who don't want to see the UBI plus go away because of, we see how our system functions or dysfunctions. So people would be concerned that already have welfare or disability, hopefully not Social Security would go away, that they're concerned that, well, in the transition of this new system, they might lose all of that, which would concern people. Because we have, as you know, lots of people homeless. More and more people are out in the streets. A lot of people have lost homes since 2008. They've lost careers, income, savings, even pensions, retirement savings. I can certainly relate to that. I know millions of people that way. 40% can't afford basic necessities or a $500 emergency, and it's just going to get worse until we can do something. So what do you think about a dividend that's based on, like, the commons? Like, for instance, the things that we all share together. For instance, the internet, intellectual property, when we do develop solar and wind and hydropower systems, and even fossil fuels like the Permanent Fund in Alaska. What are your thoughts about the commons being part of that dividend?
Well, that's in essence what I'm proposing with the freedom dividend, which is what my version of universal basic income is. And if you think about this value-added tax, it's essentially a tax on our common marketplace. And so the spirit is exactly identical to the petroleum fund that you describe and carbon tax and dividend, which I'm for. So the tricky part to me is that you can find something and you put it in place of the natural resources to tax it, but then the amount of money you're talking about is unclear to people. So I'm much rather just start at the end goal. It's very easy to understand, $1,000 a month for every American adult. And then we can figure out what common resources that we need to harness to get there.
I've been asked, Dan, what do you think should be done about divide and conquer that our mainstream media is involved in, separating us out, giving us all kinds of titles by our ethnicities and our races, our political preferences, our our income, our status, and just separating us. What are you going to do about that to bring us together even more?
Well, it's one reason my candidacy is catching fire, is that people can see that I'm laser focused on solving the problems on the ground that got Donald Trump elected, and just improving our lives. And there's no stone throwing here, no somehow castigating literally tens of millions of Americans who voted for a particular candidate for a million different reasons. And so because I've got a highly pragmatic approach to solving problems on the ground, and you can go and see on my website, I've got almost 100 policies just laid out for the world to see, then people get very excited about me as someone who can build bridges and work with anyone.
Fantastic. And I know you got a busy schedule, so I want to ask you, I'm an advocate for worker cooperatives. I believe that the UK Labour Party's manifesto has democratized the economy, has some really good ideas in it about how to allow the workers to be owners, the right of first refusal, to actually buy a company out together as workers. What do you think about that as a long-term solution going forward for our country?
I think worker cooperatives are phenomenal, and the more of that sort of structure we have, the better off we'd be. That's one thing I love about the freedom dividend, is that workers having that sort of ownership stake becomes much more realistic in an economy where people all are sharing in the rewards and have some resources to bring to the table. Where the worker subsistence model is just going to get more and more punishing. And so we have to make owners out of everyone of this society. That's one reason why it's called a freedom dividend, because that's what owners receive when they own shares of a company. They receive a dividend, and we are the owners and shareholders of this country. We should get a dividend, and that would put more workers in position to become owners of various businesses.
And the more we develop those kinds of businesses like solar and wind and hydropower, it becomes obvious this is the commons that we all actually, we're building this wealth that you were talking about. We all built together. Even if some people are out of work for a while, everybody contributed to this for decades or however long, you know what I mean? So we should be able to get something back, and the wealth should not, this great wealth that's been created should not be going primarily to the top. It's something like 80% now. It was ridiculous. So we have to start taking those measures to go in that direction and make sure that I think the system needs to reorganize the structure so that wealth is distributed differently in the first place. Yes. Don't you agree?
And the most effective way to do that is through something like universal basic income, to build what I call the trickle-up economy, from people and families and communities up. And there are, frankly, relatively few paths to try and build that economy. And in my opinion, everyone's going to understand very quickly that the fastest, most direct, and successful path there is going to involve just putting money into people's hands. It's like a lot of other politicians are trying to backtrack into it in various ways. It's like, oh, we're going to try and make this free, we're going to try and make that free. But like the best way to make us all owners and beneficiaries is to put money in our hands.
Exactly, and we'll contribute to the economy. And
the money's just going to get circulated over and over again through the economy. And we're all going to win for it. Like, even if you go to a room full of CEOs, which I have spoken to, and they know that their businesses do better in an economy where people have money to spend.
And we'll be able to help people that actually are in need, like, the people in depression, people that are on addicted to opiates. And also, too, I'm an advocate for encouraging people to be productive. And to be honest with you, I think most people actually want to be productive, don't you?
Yeah, of course. And that's one of the things that studies have shown with universal basic income, is that work levels stay essentially the same. The only two groups that work less are new moms who spend more time with their kids and teenagers who graduate from high school at higher levels. So I don't think anyone's going to get mad at that. So I agree. If we have better measurements for our economy, we can start solving the real problems of this age instead of this phantom GDP number, stock market price growth that only advantages really the top fifth of the population, and this phantom headline unemployment number, which is completely not indicative of where we are as a society right now.
Yeah, definitely, because there's underemployed, there's low-wage jobs with little or no benefits, there's temporary gigs and temporary jobs, and it's all of that.
And there's labor force participation, which right now is at 63%, which is near a multi-decade low in the same levels as Ecuador and Costa Rica. So, there are all these pain points that we all see and feel in the economy, and then we're cheerleading these phantom numbers that paint a rosier picture that we all know rings false.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And where can people find your website and more about you?
Yeah, so if you go to yang2020.com, you can see all about our platform, from freedom dividend to new measurements for the economy, or you can just Google Andrew Yang.
It is imperative for all of us to do some real soul searching about whether or not we are ready to put some sweat equity on this thing. There is only one candidate, and I mean one, who had the courage in 2016 to lift these issues to a national level, and his name is Bernard Sanders. Just one. Just one. And it's beautiful, family, and I mean this, because I want people to evolve. I want folks to understand that they were on the wrong path and they see another path and they say, I believe. But for some of these folks, I'm just trying to understand, did they believe all along, or do they believe just because they running for president? I'm just trying to understand that. Senator Bernard Sanders, head to head, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, hell, before he was even elected to office. He's been on the right side of history. A visionary. So we need these other folks to speak on it. And every single candidate, can I just say this, Santa Monica, every single candidate that is running as a Democrat, one way or the other, is singing from the gospel according to Bernard Sanders.
Are you ready for a political revolution? I'm here tonight to ask of you several important things. Number one, we need your help to win the Democratic primary in California. I think we are going to win in Iowa and New Hampshire. I think we're going to do very, very well in South Carolina and in Nevada. And then we come to California, which is bigger than all of the rest. So I think it is a fair statement to make that the candidate who wins here in California is going to win the Democratic nomination. And with your help, let's do it. And then after we win here in California, and after we win the Democratic primary nationally, then together we are going to have the historical opportunity to defeat the most dangerous president in the history of this country. What this campaign is about is exactly the opposite of what Trump is trying to do. He wants to divide us up. We are bringing people together. And we are bringing people together around a progressive agenda that works for all of us, not just the 1%. So I'm asking for your help to win the nomination and to defeat Donald Trump, but I am asking uniquely of all of the campaigns out there something even more of you. And that is what you know and I know, and why the message of our campaign is us, not me, is that no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it alone. What this campaign understands is that real change always, always, always takes place from the bottom on up, not from the top on down. So I am going to need your help the day after we get inaugurated. I am going to need the help of tens of millions of people who are prepared to stand up to the greed of Wall Street. We got 6 financial institutions today that have assets of more than $10 trillion. Now, I don't want you to tell anybody, but we're going to break those financial institutions up. We have an insurance industry that last year made over $23 billion in profit. And while their CEOs make huge compensation packages, over 80 million Americans have either no health insurance or they are underinsured. So we've got some bad news for the private insurance industry. Whether they like it or not, this country is going to join the rest of the industrialized world. We are going to pass a Medicare for all single-payer program. So today we say to the pharmaceutical industry, whether you like it or not, we're going to end your greed. When we talk about the greed of Wall Street, when we talk about the greed of the insurance companies, when we talk about the greed of the pharmaceutical industry, we also have to talk about the insanity of what's going on with the fossil fuel industry. And what they are doing, according to virtually all of the scientists who have studied this issue, is that if we do not in the next 12 years radically transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy, there will be underlined irreparable damage done to our country and countries all over the world. What are the economic rights of human beings? What are we entitled to as human beings? Way back in 1944, Franklin Delano Roosevelt gave a speech. And what he said is, you know, we got a lot of political freedoms in America, freedom of religion, freedom of to vote, freedom of assembly, and all that, the Bill of Rights. But what we don't have, this is back in 1944, are fundamental economic rights. And what this campaign is about is redefining what human rights are in America. So let me be as clear as I can be. In this country, it must be a human right for all of our people to have access to a decent paying job. And God knows there is enough work to do, rebuilding our infrastructure, transforming our energy system, taking care of our elderly, taking care of our kids, and having the best education system in the world. A lot of work there. It is a human right to have health care and go to the doctor when you need to go to the doctor. It is a human right to have quality education and be able to get all the education you need regardless of your income. And here in California and all over this country, it is a human right to have affordable housing. We are going to end the disgrace. You know, one of the things that bothers me is we have gotten used to the fact that here in LA or San Francisco or Burlington, Vermont, that we have people sleeping out on the streets. This is America. We must never, never accept homelessness as a normal. And that is why together we will build the millions of units of affordable housing this country desperately needs. Toxic water does not just exist in Flint, Michigan. Toxic water exists in California, it exists in Vermont, and it exists all over this country. We are going to rebuild our infrastructure so that every American who turns on that faucet knows that the water he or she drinks is clean and healthy. And when our people get old and seek retirement, we are going to do exactly the opposite of what Republicans want. They want to cut Social Security. We are going to expand Social Security benefits. So our job as a people is to think outside of the box, not accept what the media tells you is reality. You know what reality is. You know what we can do as a country. This is the wealthiest country in the world. We should not have 40 million people living in poverty. We should not have more income and wealth inequality than at any time since the 1920s. So, brothers and sisters, what we are engaged in is not just a political campaign. We are engaged in a political revolution. And that revolution is taking on the incredibly powerful corporate interests that to a very significant degree control the economic and political life of this country. And I'm talking about Wall Street and the insurance companies and the drug companies and the fossil fuel industry and the military-industrial complex. Now, it is not going to be easy, and I don't want to mislead you for a second. It is not going to be easy to take on these powerful special interests. They own the media. They own much of our economy. All right? But at the end of the day, the NRA too, you're right. It's another powerful special interest. But at the end of the day, and this is the main point that I want to make to you, if we have the courage to think big, and if we have the courage to envisage the kind of nation that we want to become, a nation where we have eliminated poverty, a nation where all people have the health care they need as a human right, a nation in which all people can get the education they need, a nation in which we are leading the world in fighting climate change, a nation in which we're not throwing people into jail but getting them decent jobs, a nation in which we're not demonizing immigrants but establishing a path towards citizenship, a nation which finally addresses the institutional racism which is so rampant in America. This is not utopian dreaming. This is not utopian dreaming. At the end of the day, the 1%, and I deal with them every day, they are enormously powerful. They influence what goes on television. They own the TV. They own the newspapers. All right? They own our economy. They own our political system with massive campaign contributions. But at the end of the day, the 1% is 1%. We are 99%. And if we stand up and do not allow Trump and his friends to divide us up, if we keep our eyes on the prize of creating the kind of humane society we can become, if we are prepared to get deeply involved in the political process, if we are prepared to tell our friends and neighbors that we're tired of hearing them complain, that they have got to get involved in the political process. Brothers and sisters, if we do all of that, we can create an extraordinary country that the whole world will be looking to for leadership. Thank you all very much.